The air is heavy, thick, with the bitter temps of olive oil lamps burning low. Their flames flicker and shiver, throwing long shadows across stone walls carved by centuries of prayer. At first, you hear it, faintly, a low rumble like distant thunder rolling in from the desert. Then it grows, hooves pounding the earth, the sharp crack of siege engines tearing wood apart. And then, the screams. Not the wild chaos of battle, but something deeper, a breaking. A chorus of voices collapsing into the night. Women calling names into the dark as flames claw upward beyond the Mount of Olives. Dust fills your mouth, scratching your throat, mixing with the metallic taste of blood already spilled. Figures in scale armor surge through a breach in the wall, faces smeared with sweat and fury, swords flashing under torchlight. Doors shatter, one after another. 400 voices rise in defiance, then fall silent. And this is only the beginning. What follows will echo through empires, a shadow no king, no god could outrun. Before we go further, understand this. What you're about to hear is not legend. It is not exaggeration. It is history carved into bone, a story of conquest so complete. It tried to erase memory itself. Imagine a world balanced on a knife's edge. To the west, the fading power of Rome's legacy, clinging to its last breath through Byzantium. To the east, the rising fire of Persia. Disciplined, relentless, unstoppable. This was not chaos. This was a machine fueled by ambition, sharpened by betrayal, and aimed directly at Jerusalem in the spring of 614. At its center stood a man, Khosrow II, King of Kings. But before he became a conqueror, he was a survivor. His father ruled with cruelty. Nobles rebelled. Blood filled the court, and the young prince fled. Not east, but west. To his enemy, to the Byzantine Emperor Maurice. Maurice saved him, restored him, gave him a throne. For years, loyalty held. Until one night, Maurice was murdered. His body displayed like a warning. And something inside Khosrow changed forever. This was no longer politics. This was vengeance. His armies moved like a storm. City after city fell. Damascus, Antioch, the Levant burned in sequence. And at the center of it all stood Jerusalem. Not Costa City, but a symbol. Break it, and an empire would bleed. Inside its walls, people still prayed, still hoped, still believed the walls would hold. At the heart of that belief stood Patriarch Zechariah, an old man, not a warrior, but a voice that had guided thousands. On the final morning, he stood on the walls, tracing a cross in the air, whispering a prayer that the city might survive. Below him, the siege had already begun. Stones smashed against ancient defenses. Arrows screamed through the sky. Dust fell like rain. For 21 days, the city held. Then the wall broke, and the machine entered. Jerusalem's streets turned into corridors of death. Narrow paths once filled with merchants and pilgrims now echoed with footsteps of soldiers and the clash of steel. Smoke swallowed the sky. Inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Zechariah made one final decision. Hide the relic, the true cross, believed to carry the weight of Christ himself, sealed beneath stone. But secrets do not survive long in war. Betrayal opened the way. Persian forces found it, dragged it through the streets like a trophy. By evening, the city had fallen completely. But victory was not enough. Orders arrived, not to conquer, but to erase. At the pool of Mamilla, thousands gathered. Families, priests, children. They believed it was safe. It wasn't. Swords rose and fell again and again. The water turned red. Some said 4,000 died there. Others said 20,000, some Sagwai. But numbers don't matter when the ground itself remembers. And still, the worst had not yet come. High above the city, on the Mount of Olives, there stood a convent. Quiet, isolated, untouched by war. Until now, 400 women lived there. Not warriors, not rebelles, only voices of prayer. Among them, Sister Maria. A widow, a survivor of loss, a woman who had chosen silence over the chaos of the world. When the fires of Jerusalem lit the night sky, she did not run. She stood. The soldiers came at dawn. They circled the convent like predators, demanded surrender. "Live as servants," they said. Maria stepped forward. "We serve only one master." The gates fell soon after. What followed was not chaos. It was organized, measured, systematic. The women were divided like numbers on a page. Voices rose in prayer, even as violence closed in. Maria, bleeding, whispered to a young girl beside her. "Sing." And she did. A fragile limb, rising against the sound of destruction. By the end, all 400 were gone. Not forgotten, but counted. Reduced to numbers in a ledger of conquest. Yet even in that darkness, something resisted. A soldier lowered his weapon. Another turned away. Small cracks in a perfect machine. The conquest did not end with death. It continued with chains. 35,000 captives marched east, a moving shadow across the land. Among them, Zechariah, and beside him, the stolen cross. In Persia, victory was celebrated. Numbers recorded, cities reduced to statistics. But something was wrong. The machine was slowing. The relic meant to prove dominance. Became abord and resistance grew. Whispers turned into rebellion. Doubt crept into the court itself. Then, suddenly, the king fell. Khosrow II, the man who had commanded empires, was executed by his own son. Silently, quickly, like a number erased from a list. And just like that, the machine began to collapse. The cross was returned. Zechariah was freed. Jerusalem slowly breathed again. But it was not the same. It would never be the same. Years passed. Empires shifted. New armies arrived. New rulers claimed the city. But the shadow of 614 remained. Then, centuries later, in 1989, the ground spoke. Archaeologists uncovered a cave. Inside, bones. Hundreds of them. Men, women, children. Stacked together. Silent witnesses. Coins confirmed the date. The stories were real. The massacre had happened, but something else was revealed too. Not everything was destroyed. Not everyone died. Life somehow continued, and that is the final truth. Empires resay, machines of power, crush everything in their path, but they never fully erase what came before. Because memory survives in stone, in soil, in stories. Return now, one last time, to that courtyard on the Mount of Olives. The almond tree still blooms. Petals fall softly over the ground where voices once sang. The silence that followed was not peace. It was something heavier, a silence that pressed down on the city like ash after a fire, settling into cracks, into homes, into memory itself. Jerusalem still stood, but it no longer felt alive. Walk its streets now, not as a conqueror, not as a victim, but as a witness. Doors hang open where families once gathered. Clay jars lie shattered across stone floors. A child's sandal rests in the corner of an empty room, untouched, as if time itself refused to move it. There are no voices here anymore. Only echoes. The markets, once loud with bargaining and laughter, are silent. No spices fill the air. No coins exchange hands. Only the faint smell of smoke lingers, mixed with something deeper, something human. This is what conquest looks like after victory fades. Not glory, not triumph, but absence. And yet, even here, life begins again. A woman returns first, no name recorded, no story written, only her footsteps marking the dust as she walks through what used to be her home. She pauses at the doorway, touches the wall, and steps inside. This is how cities survive, not through kings, not through armies, but through those who come back. Across the hills, small groups begin to gather. Survivors, strangers, people who lost everything, but still chose to remain. They rebuild, slowly. One stone, one wall. One life at a time. But memory does not rebuild so easily. 4 years after the siege, people spoke in lowered voices. Not because they forgot, but because they remembered too well. Stories spread, not written in books, but carried in whispers. The night the sky turned red, the day the walls fell, the hill where the voices stopped. Children grew up hearing these stories, not understanding them fully, but feeling their weight. And far away, empires continued their games. In Constantinople, leaders debated strategy. Maps were drawn, lines moved. Jerusalem was discussed, not as a place of loss, but as a peace to be reached. War, to those far from it, is always cleaner. When Emperor Heraclius finally marched to take back the lost lands, he did not see what the survivors saw. He saw opportunity. Redemption, not a chance to restore honor. His campaign was long, brutal, relentless. But eventually, he succeeded. In 629, he entered Jerusalem, not on horseback, but barefoot. A deliberate act, a symbol of humility, of repentance. He carried the true cross himself. Through the same streets where it had once been dragged as a trophy, crowds gathered. Some wept. Some watched in silence. Some felt nothing at all. Because symbols do not erase memory, the cross returned. But the people who had died did not. The convent on the Mount of Olives remained empty. No songs, no prayers, only wind moving through broken stone. Travelers who passed by would sometimes stop, not because they were told to, but because something about the place felt heavy. They could not explain it, but they felt it. That is how history lingers. Not always in books, but in places. Years turned into decades. Decades into centuries. Jerusalem changed hands again and again and again. Each new ruler believed they were shaping the future. None realized they were standing on layers of the past. The Persian conquest became a chapter, then a paragraph, then a footnote. But beneath the surface, it never truly disappeared, because history does not vanish. It waits, and sometimes it is uncovered. In 1989, when archaeologists began digging near the old city, they were not looking for tragedy. They were looking for structure, foundations, artifacts, clues about daily life. Instead, they found something else. Bones. Hundreds of them. At first, it did not make sense. The remains were too many. Too close together. Too violent. This was not a burial. This was a moment frozen in time. Skulls crushed, bones broken, bodies piled without order. No ceremony. No respect. No names. Whose evidence? Coins found among the remains told the story clearly. They pointed to a single moment, a single event. The past had spoken again. For the archaeologists, this was not just discovery, it was confrontation. They were not uncovering history. They were uncovering people. A child, a mother, a priest, someone who had lived, laughed, hoped, and then disappeared. The records had spoken of numbers, tens of thousands. But here, the truth was smaller, closer, more human. Not numbers, lives. And that changes everything, because numbers can be ignored, numbers can be debated, numbers can be forgotten. But a single life is harder to erase. This is the real legacy of that night. Not the victory, not the empire, not the politics, but the people. The woman who returned home, the child who never did. The voices that rose in song, even in the face of death. And the question that remains, how does something like this happen? Not once, but again. And again. Across history, the answer is uncomfortable, because it is not monsters who build these machines. It is ordinary people, following orders, chasing reward, avoiding punishment, step by step, choice by choice. A system forms, and once it is moving, it becomes difficult to stop until something breaks it. Sometimes it is rebellion, sometimes it is collapse, sometimes it is time itself. But always, there is a cost, and that cost is never paid by those who design the system. It is paid by those caught inside it. So when we look back at Jerusalem in 614, we are not just looking at the past. We are looking at a pattern, one that repeats in different places, in different forms, in different names, but always with the same result: silence, loss, memory, and somewhere, a voice that refuses to disappear. Listen closely. You can still hear it, not in the noise of battle, not in the speeches of kings, but in the quiet spaces, in the places where something once stood and is now gone. That is where history speaks the loudest.